podcast where we interview fourth-year University of Toronto students about interesting experiences they had in the year away from school. My name is Ilya Kranin. I'm a fourth-year industrial engineering student here at U of T, and I'll be talking to Dave today. Behind production is Arkady Hungarovatsky, the mastermind behind the whole operation. Let's get into it. So today we're talking to Dave Boroto. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm David Boroto. I'm a fourth-year engineering science student in the infrastructure program.
Sweet. So could you give people a bit of a brief overview of what you did over PUI?
Yeah. So I split my PUI into like a 4-month chunk and then a 12-month chunk. For the first 4 months, I was working in Nairobi, Kenya with an affordable housing startup called Kwangu Kwako. And what they're trying to do is innovate on affordable housing in Nairobi slums. And I was working on that through EWB, through what they call a junior fellowship. So I did that for 4 months, came back to Toronto, where I worked for IBI Group. And so what they do, they're a technology-driven design firm and engineering consulting firm. And their whole mandate is to kind of define the cities of tomorrow, as they call it. Mm-hmm. So I was working in their traffic engineering and road user safety group, doing a wide variety of things.
All right, that's awesome. So let's focus on that first one first. So what you were on was an Engineers Without Borders fellowship, right? You've been heavily involved in the EWB. Why don't you tell people about that?
Yeah, so I've literally been in EWB since my first or second day on campus at U of T. It was kind of funny because the summer before I came to U of T, I guess all the way back in 2014, I was looking on their website for different clubs that I wanted to join, and I knew that I wanted to get involved in a club that was focused on international development. So I found EWB, read their mission, saw their website, everything like that, drank all the Kool-Aid, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of this club. So Clubs Fair, I went, found their booth, went out to their first meeting, and then got involved from there, and I've been involved ever since. Taking on various roles throughout the chapter. I was like a general member in first year, a lead of our youth engagement portfolio in second year, did member learning in third year, which is kind of just like a space for all of us to have critical discussions about development. And then last year, while over my PY, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and become chapter president with the amazing Catherine Bancroft. Shout out to her.
Shout out to K-Banks.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And would you say like you were interested in development before you got into U of T, or what did EWB foster that?
Oh, I was 100% interested in development since before I came to U of T. Where that interest kind of stems from. So I guess a bit about myself. I was born and raised in South Africa. That's usually a surprise to people because my accent just like completely disappeared.
Right, you don't sound like this, your kind.
Exactly. So I was born and raised in South Africa to Congolese parents, and so I grew up in a Catholic household. So that just growing up with that religion just kind of gave me the principles of almsgiving and just kind of giving back to your community. And then growing up with my parents who are from the DRC, they were still heavily involved in anything going on in their communities back home. Given the fact that they came from humble upbringings and made it to success, they did everything that they could to make sure that their friends and their families from their communities had the same opportunity to do that. And so just growing up in that household kind of gave me the sense of everything that you have is not necessarily by your own doing, but there is some external hand, there's some external privilege that kind of got you to where you are. And so you kind of have a responsibility to use your privilege to help others to kind of make a living for themselves or to, get up on their 2 feet. Fast forward to when I was 13 and I moved to Canada. Canada being a more developed country in the world, their focus on development is more external then. So they focus, I found a very huge focus on charity and on giving, both on a local scale, but then also on a global scale. So when I got to high school in Victoria, BC, I joined a few clubs like I was on World Vision and Free the Children. And through those clubs, I kind of just took my first stab into international development. Went on a trip to India with some people in my high school as well to build a school and things like that. So I was passionate about development and my heart was in the right place. But I think, especially looking at it now, I wasn't the most critical thinker when it comes to development. And so that's where kind of EWB comes in. If there's anything that EWB has done for me since I joined it in first year, it's kind of helped me take a critical look about the world that we live in, and things like poverty, inequality, why those things exist, and then what's the best, or I guess the most long-term sustainable way to approach them. So my passion was like definitely there when I came in, but EWB definitely helped me focus my efforts into more long-term sustainable solutions to poverty and inequality. And also just helped me understand that all of these issues are very nuanced. There's no single shot solution like going overseas to build a school for a community. There's a lot more complicated. It's a lot more complicated than that, and you have to take into consideration a wide variety of things. The idea of systems thinking is kind of at the heart of EWB, and that kind of shapes everything. At least in my mindset and how I think about it, that there are multiple different actors, both here in Canada who want to help with development, and in whatever local community that you're working in, who have a stake and who have something to say in this project. And then in order to make development work, you kind of have to engage everyone, especially the people in the area that you're trying to work. And so EWB kind of exposed me to that kind of line of thinking, and then through my different roles and through my different positions in the club, I was kind of able to unpack that and kind of explore that a bit more, and kind of see what it takes to be involved in development and what it takes to address these really wide-ranging issues.
So to say you had an interest from before is an understatement.
Yeah, 100%. Development is my stuff. I know I want to be in development in some way, shape, or form in my career. It's like my life's goal and my life's passion. And so you're 100% correct. This is what I want to do.
We'll come back to that whole systems approach, I think. But first, you said you were with Kwangu Kwako. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Kwangu Kwako, yeah.
Kwangu Kwako, for the first 4 months of your PY.
Exactly.
Can you tell people a little bit about what that looks like? Like, what do they do, and what did you do with them?
Exactly. And before I do that, I'll just like take a broader approach, because like that 4 months was just like one. One part of a wider 16 months of what we call the junior fellowship program.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and so that I got that opportunity through EWB Canada and through our local EWB U of T chapter. So I applied to be like a U of T representative in the junior fellowship program all the way back in about September, October. A couple of months later, fast forward, for some reason they decided to choose me as a junior fellow. I was really fortunate enough for that. So from January to May, before I left, I took part in a pre-departure training program, which mainly consisted of like online lessons with all the other junior fellows from all across Canada, because a lot of the other EWB chapters across Canada also send junior fellows. So that was really just to get us to, one, unpack what our experience overseas is going to be like, unpack some of the issues that we might be seeing, unpack some of the issues that the organizations that we're placed with are tackling, and then go through things like privilege and how to be an ally, gender equality and how that plays a role in international development, especially when you're working overseas. So really kind of a comprehensive program that kind of gets you in the mindset of all the different things that you might encounter while working in the development space. And then a week in May, the first week of May, all of the junior fellows came to Toronto, and that was just a week-long intense program tackling things from like the history of colonialism and how that might manifest itself still today and in all the countries that we worked in, all the way to like all the different ways you could potentially die while overseas if you're not looking after yourself properly. So it's kind of like it's just a week-long thing to shock your system, to make sure that you're kind of ready for anything that you might encounter. All to say, and I think they over-exaggerated on a lot of the other things, because I think going overseas, if not done right, can have terrible consequences. But if you're just like smart about yourself, if you're smart and have your wits about you, it's completely normal. At least completely comparable to anything you might experience here in Canada. But anyways, so after that week-long pre-departure training, that's when I flew to Nairobi and actually got on the ground and started doing stuff with Kwangu Kwako. Right. And so what that experience looked like, Kwangu Kwako is a very, very small startup. When I was there, we were a team of 5 people, made up of our 2 founders, Simon Dixon and Winnie Gitao. Both of them had extensive experience working within Nairobi, working in the slums there, particularly working in sanitation in the slums. And then through that work, they kind of found a need for affordable housing, which is why they founded Kwangu Kwako. And then our team also had another Kenyan man named Simon, another Simon. So he handled more of our construction management and just like logistics and everything related to that. We had another EWB fellow, a long-term fellow named Chris Morgan. So he had been there for a year before I joined and had recently renewed his contract for a second year. And then there's me, who came in just as a junior fellow for 4 months. So what I did with Kwangu Kwako, it really varied all throughout the summer, and I took on multiple different roles.
I would think so when you were 20% of a company.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's one thing that I'd heard about startups beforehand and that I experienced is that roles and titles are kind of, well, these titles are meaningless and roles are very fluid. Right. And so I think my title was fundraising and technical manager. So 2 very, very different things kind of just matched together because that's what I did. So the first 2 months were mainly focused on that technical aspect. I focused on building them an inventory system because the way our houses are built, it's not like you just, it's not like say a building like Bain where you just pour concrete and everything is kind of just one concrete unit. Our houses are made from individual precast concrete panels. Okay. And so we have a manufacturing warehouse about an hour outside of Nairobi. It's actually great. They recently moved their warehouse. But anyways, so that's where we prefabricate all of our concrete panels. Right. They're about say a meter wide and 3/4 of a meter tall. And so we'll make I guess 100 or so to actually make a house. And so when we have an order, we'll take those panels to site and we'll build a house kind of out of Lego. So it's really cool. It's a very interesting design of the houses. That's interesting. This kind of people, and it's interesting because people say that Civ isn't an industry that you can kind of innovate on, but that was a very innovative way to approach housing just to kind of fit the demand of the slums.
Was it based on anything, or did they take it from? What did they make it their own?
So the way it works is that we'll go into site. Someone will have a landlord will have a plot of land that they want to build on. So we will first excavate the land as much as we need to, lay a slab on, just kind of act as a foundation for the house. Let that cure for about a week. Because I guess concrete, it needs 28 days to gain full strength, but after about a week, you're good to build on it and actually use it. So based on that slab, we build the house on top of that, and we secure the house or the panels onto the slab by just screwing or drilling it into there. So because of the way our houses are designed, with all these different panels, when I got there, we had I think 64 different types of panels, all so that you can fit the pieces together to make a house. And there are that many just because as well we offer different sizes of houses, so you needed a different size panel for each size house.
Would all the houses of the same size look the same?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the houses, slum housing is quite modest, if I can put it that way. So the houses that we built range from 10 by 10 foot to 12 by 12 foot. So when I say house, it's really just a single room that you can fit your bed in, your desk in, and everything else like that you kind of just need to sleep and live, and like maybe even like a cooking utensil as well. It's interesting because when I think when I initially saw that, and I think when anyone else hearing this or sees that would kind of be confused as to how that can be considered a house and how someone can live off that. And the interesting thing about Nairobi slums is that outside of like your living needs, like for sleeping, say, and then any other personal space that you need, a lot of the other services are communal. And I think the one that people like might resonate with more is sanitation, because at home, I'm sure I do, you do have like my own like bathroom with like a toilet and a shower and a sink that I can use to kind of bathe and just get myself ready in the morning and everything like that. In slums, a lot of those services are communal. So just because I think a lot of the infrastructure doesn't exist in the slums for all those services to become personalized and go directly to your homes, a lot of them go to communal centers where you can get fresh water as you need to, where you can go shower and then just kind of freshen up and kind of take care of all that things. And then like sanitation as well, there's communal washrooms as well that you can go use. And so just kind of because the slums are so densely packed and densely populated, the houses are all compact, and so you can't fit all those services in an individual home, so they end up becoming communal services as well. So that was just a very interesting thing, just like seeing how the community is organized, a lot different from how we do it. And it's interesting because when you look at slums, a lot of people just directly think the slums are associated with poverty, and like a lot of people in slums are living in poverty as well, but it's also they're just structured differently from what we're used to.
On a pretty fundamental level.
Exactly. And I think that more so than us associating it with poverty, I think a part of the issue is that it's just different from what we're used to. And because slums are also, I guess, less cleansy and everything like that, we associate directly with poverty, while that isn't necessarily always the case.
Right.
So that was just an interesting thing to observe while over there.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning kind of like the day-to-day of being, one of 5 people at this company. So I think when people think about like a startup life in North America, they think, you show up to your office, maybe there's a beanbag chair, and then you're on your computer. Yeah. What was a day like for you over there?
So I had 2 different kinds of days, or 3, I'd say. A typical day would be exactly what you just described. I show up to the office, get on my laptop. Either when I was doing the technical stuff, I'd either figure out like how to build the inventory system, how to make it so that it suits their needs, how to make it so that throughout the construction process they can kind of keep track of the changing inventory. And then as like throughout as my role transitioned to more of like a marketing, fundraising, communications role, that was primarily what I was doing on the office, like preparing like grant applications, pitch decks, and things of that nature. A second typical day would be when I go out to our manufacturing site. I think in my 4 months there, I think I went 5 days, primarily to see the construction process and kind of get a feel for that, and then also just take stock of our inventory at the time so that we had a base and could update that accordingly. So those days were very fun just because we go up to a place called Athi River that's about like an hour outside of Nairobi, and because making that trip is usually just like a pain, we'd like stay overnight there as well. So we'd go spend some day on site. Like I'd usually go with Chris and Simon, and they'd be doing some R&D while I'd also be doing like some inventory stuff or any other things that I needed to do in my technical capacity. One of the other projects I got to work on as well was like an R&D project. And so one of my days out there was prototyping a model that I built on SketchUp is what I was using.
Right.
So just prototyping that into real life and just seeing if my like model worked, which it did, which is
that's awesome.
Super, super exciting and super rewarding. So that was just like a second typical day, going out to our manufacturing site and doing whatever I needed to. And then the third type of day, which I found really valuable, was going out into the slum communities themselves with, usually went with Simon, like founder Simon, and Winnie. And so that's when they go like do some marketing, talk to people about our homes, and just like if they knew people who were interested, just kind of go visit them and assess the site and everything like that. I think probably my favorite day at Kwangu Kwako was a day that we just kind of went to Kibera slum, which is like the biggest slum in all of Africa actually. It's funny, it was 2 minutes away from where I was living. But we went there for a day and just kind of met with different families who were interested in buying our homes, and just kind of gave them the pitch and everything like that. And it was funny because Winnie is like being the Kenyan of the group. She is the most fluent in Swahili and everything like that. So she'd do the majority of the talking. She'd do the majority of the pitching. And so how it would work is that we'd walk into their house. Winnie would like kind of just take the lead. Simon, with his broken Swahili, would kind of like add bits and pieces wherever, and he's like a super energetic guy as well, so he kind of brought a lot of energy to it. And I'd just be like sitting in the corner, you know, just like looking around, like assessing the house and everything like that, because I don't speak a lick of Swahili.
Right.
So for me, and I'm used to that just because even at home, my parents speak French, Swahili, Lingala, all other languages like from the DRC, and so whenever I'd have family gatherings, I'd often be the odd one out who can't speak.
Your English is great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It might be because it's the only language I speak.
Perhaps.
So I was in a similar situation while they were visiting people's houses. So it was like it was like fun. Like I was just like observing people's houses, just kind of looking how they're designed and everything like that. There are houses from like mabati, which is sheet metal held together by wooden poles, or there were like mud brick or like mud clay structures and everything like that. So kind of just like looking around the structural engineering and being like, okay, how's this house being held up? Where's the supports and what's the structural design? All that type of stuff. So as we were walking between houses, someone ran up to me and said, hey, I have like my aunt like just down the road. She's very interested in your houses. Like, can you come and give her a pitch of like what we're doing and everything like that? So I'm just like, okay. I don't speak a word of Swahili. I don't know what I'm doing. This is my first week there as well, so I don't know the product. I don't know our prices. I don't know our pitch, anything like that. So I'm like, okay, cool. Let me just like grab one of the founders. So I just grabbed Simon because he was the closest nearby. And so we run like through this like back alley, down this little road and everything like that till we finally get to their house. And it's great. Like Simon in his broken Swahili does a pitch. We have like our little pamphlet and everything like that, speaking. And it's funny because they're always turning to me to see if I'm going to speak and one thing I found is that when I was there, people assumed because I was black, I was Kenyan, and because I was Kenyan, I could speak Swahili. Yeah. So they're just waiting for me to just like kind of jump in and it's like.
And also, you're like just sitting across from a very energetic person, so it probably often seems like you're about to say a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think I was a bit more introverted in that situation as well, just because like fair enough. It's like kind of you're out of your comfort zone. So they're looking at me to kind of jump in and everything like that, so it never happens. And anyway, so at the end, Simon gets through his pitch. They offer us food while we're there because like that's just a thing over there. It's really awesome. And as we're leaving, what I assumed to be like a drunk uncle was like lying on the couch as we're leaving, and he turns to us and says, "Ha! It's funny. The white man or the Mzungu, as they call white people." The Mzungu speaks more Swahili than the black man. And for him, it was just like this funny thing. Because like, white people aren't supposed to speak Swahili. What is that? And all black people speak Swahili. So like, what's going on? Right. So that was an interesting, I guess, funny cultural moment.
That's hilarious.
While at work. It was great. That wasn't the first time people assumed I was Kenyan and thus assumed I could speak Swahili. So just like my day-to-day interactions while there, whether I was like buying eggs in the morning for breakfast or whether I was like at the supermarket, people would just like I'd go up to the counter and they'd start speaking to me in Swahili, and it's partially my fault because I'd go up and say Jambo, abarigani, hello, how are you doing? And they just like come back at me with like Swahili. It's like all down, all in my ear, and be like, yeah, sorry, that's the extent of my Swahili. Thank you very much. So yeah.
Were you able to get by fine on English?
Oh, 100%. So one of the, I guess, national languages in Kenya is English. And so Nairobi, being a very metropolitan city, everyone is fluent in English. You can get by in English. My first night in Nairobi, we went grocery shopping. And I was looking for, I think, like eggs or milk or something like that. So I go to one of the helpers in the store and say, "Hey, excuse me, do you speak English?" And he just turns to me and just gives me this look. And he's like, "Dude, it's Nairobi.
Yeah.
Of course I speak English." And that was like one of those moments like, oh, I'm a shithead.
Yeah.
So yeah, Nairobi is like completely fluent in English. You can get by everything. Yeah.
Okay, I got you. That's awesome. So you had a lot of these ideas about development before you did this fellowship, and even like before you came into university. Were those ideas like more reinforced or changed like by being over there?
That's a very good question. I think I got more perspective, specifically around the idea of poverty and what poverty looks like. Because in development talk and just like in EWB, we talk about poverty a lot, how we want to alleviate poverty, what it takes, what solutions take to alleviate poverty and all of that. But I don't think I'd ever taken a step to think about, okay, what does poverty actually look like in terms of like a day-to-day living experience? And it's interesting because my parents, both who grew up in the DRC, they grew up. My dad grew up in a village called Kalole, which is a very small village, and he moved to Bukavu, which is like a bigger city, and that was where my mom was born as well. And just like from the different anecdotes in my upbringing, they tell me stories about, oh, when we're in university, you just get by. You don't know when your next meal is coming like that. You just get by and you figure it out essentially. But they say so nonchalantly that it's like, oh, that was just like the way of life and everything like that, as opposed to in some form I think that was like a form of poverty, and I don't think that kind of clicked in or realized that until I went to Kenya. And I say that just because being able to go into the slums and meet with people and interact with people and kind of just like get a sense of their lived experiences. One of my favorite days as well was going into the slums and just interviewing different people who I guess I was with like a partner organization who Simon and Winnie knew, and so they were introducing me to people they knew in the slums, and just being able to talk to them about their day-to-day lives, where they get their income from, where like how they spend their money and like what that breaks down to, what their challenges are, and everything like that. Having those personal stories kind of helped me see what poverty looks like in itself, and it's kind of it's very interesting because it broke down a lot of misconceptions that I had, because it's not like I think the easy thing to do when you think about poverty is that people are like dejected, like they're sad because like their situation around them isn't great, and so they're just like, because of their surroundings aren't the greatest, that they aren't in the best place either. And it's challenging for sure. I'm not gonna sit here and say that like poverty is not like a big deal, that it doesn't suck. But the thing is that people make joy and find joy in their lives just like out of themselves, and people also have like ambitions and dreams and things like that, goals that they strive towards. And it's very, when you encounter poverty, you won't recognize it as poverty necessarily as much, because you're interacting with another human being who has their own challenges, who has their own struggles and everything like that. It's just, whereas my challenge might be, how am I going to get this assignment in so I can get a good grade, so I can be marketable and employable or something like that. Someone else's challenge might be, okay, where am I going to get my income from today so that I can support my family, my kid, and make sure that we're that we have enough means to live. So different challenges, obviously one more severe than the other, but they're
both challenges.
Exactly. But they still approach it with a mindset of like, okay, similar to how I'd approach like, okay, how am I going to address my challenges? And like, they kind of have a similar approach. It's just, The big difference being is that the consequences of me not reaching that goal and everything isn't as big to my physical well-being and my livelihood as theirs might be.
Gotcha.
And I think, and just like an interesting story about that, how like everyone has their dreams and ambitions and everything like that. I met a vendor on one of the side streets in the slums that I was visiting. And so he had a fruit stand. He was selling everything from like apples, mangoes, like plantain, which is like we know what we have plantain here.
They look like big bananas.
Yeah, they're big bananas, which is great. So he was just like, he had a bunch of fruit, so we went and bought some stuff from his stand. And it's like I just like started talking like, hey, where are you from? Like, what are you doing? And everything like that. And so for him, his fruit stand is kind of just like his side hustle. He has a catering business, or at least was trying to start up a catering business in the city. Because I think the interesting thing about Nairobi as well is that when you have such income inequality, you have such a huge gap in wealth. You have a lot of people with living in, I guess, relative poverty or like with meager means, so close to people who are living more luxurious lifestyles and are wealthy. So right next to a slum, you can have like a downtown core similar to Toronto, with like high rises, with a mall similar to the Eaton Center and everything like that, all within like a 5-minute walking distance from each other. So it's interesting just like as a living situation, and then also just like the opportunities that it presents itself as well. For him, he had one of his businesses there in the slums, kind of catering to people living in the slums. And then his catering business was kind of more to like the luxurious wealthy market, I guess, in Nairobi. And so his dream was to be able to kind of establish that catering business, for him to be able to move out of the slum and kind of get dwelling in one of the apartments in Nairobi as well, and kind of just like establish himself there. So like you wouldn't, walking down the street, you wouldn't see that. Just like I would just see like a dude who's selling fruits on the side of the road, just making a living. But no, he has higher ambitions for himself. He has higher goals to kind of make it for himself. And I think every interaction I've had, kind of every person I encountered had like a similar story to that, where they know where they are now, but they have dreams of something bigger. And I think the goal of anyone working in international development or like poverty alleviation or any field like that is recognizing that people have their dreams, people have their ambitions. So finding the ways to enable them to realize those dreams. And I guess more importantly, how to remove the barriers that are preventing them from achieving those dreams, and those barriers that are there unjustly. Be it like racism and people discriminating against people based on the color of their skin, based on any like mental or physical disabilities that they might have, based on where they were born, etc. There are a lot of things that inhibit or make it a lot more challenging for someone to progress in their life just based circumstantially on where they were born, where they grew up. And so it's about removing those barriers to allow people to kind of work hard for themselves to achieve the dreams and the things that they want to.
Right. That's beautiful. It sounds like, I think you were telling me about this well over a year ago, that the way EWB functions has changed significantly to more accommodate what you were talking about
100%
just now.
Yeah. So if you look at where Engineers Without Borders started, it started exactly how you would think it would. And if you think of EWB, you'd probably think of a group of engineers that go overseas to do technical projects and build infrastructure, technical things for other people.
Build a school in India. Yeah.
Case in point.
Yeah.
And so that's where we began. A group of two engineering students from Waterloo, kind of like, we're engineers, we want to use our skills to make a better world. We soon found out that wasn't the most sustainable way to go about it, primarily because it was a very me-centered approach that kind of said, these are the skills that I have as an engineer. I'm going to go apply them to your community without necessarily consulting you about whether that's what you want or not. And two, without necessarily giving you the skills and the infrastructure that you need to kind of maintain that and upkeep that over time. So we went from a more like infrastructure and us-centered approach to a more human-centered approach that focused on the people that we're trying to serve. And so that that kind of transformed the work that we did to more project-based approaches centered around the countries that we're operating in. And then that kind of transitioned to where we are now, which is more of an impact investing not-for-profit organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so what EWB is trying to do is find organizations like Kwangu Kwako, like Farm Drive, which is another one that was in Nairobi that focuses more on access to financing for smallholder farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So finding different social enterprises or small businesses that have a social mandate, that are trying to create social change within their communities,
mm-hmm.
but are doing so with a financially sustainable model.
Right.
So with a business that will be self-sustaining over time, that once they reach certain numbers, certain sales, etc., the business will be able to sustain itself without any external investments.
Right.
And so the thinking behind that is kind of that these are people who are within their communities. They know their communities a lot better. They know the context of the countries that they're working in. And so they have these amazing ideas to transform some industry in their area, but they might not necessarily have access to the capital that they need, capital being like human resources and also just like financial capital to turn their ideas from an idea into a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And this is specifically like young people as well, like people maybe just like coming out of university, people with really transformative ideas. And so because a lot of these ideas are very risky, people like banks and traditional investors might not want to touch them because they don't know, they just like, there isn't as much certainty that this business will come to fruition and actually become financially sustainable and profitable so that I as an investor can get a return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
So EWB tries to focus on those specific companies that won't get traditional, that won't get access to money from your traditional sources, but have really good transformative ideas that if
Right.
you just give them enough time, if you give them enough resources and support, have the potential to be really impactful. And so those are the ones that we focus on, ones that are led by people from their own communities that are really transformative and innovative, that, by investing in this small group of people,
mm-hmm.
they'll then be able to have like exponential impact within their communities.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of us being like the people say, I have to go to Kenya and build slum houses and make sure that I'm building houses for everyone like that, we're supporting a business, Kwangu Kwako,
Right.
that has an affordable housing product, that's priced in such a way that anyone living in a slum can afford to purchase it and afford to kind of maintain it with their own salary, with their own means, and will provide them a much better standard of living and a much better quality of life. And so through supporting this business, we have the potential to impact the millions of people who are living in the slums.
Right. I'm sold.
Yeah.
That's
and if you're interested in EWB,
we'll plug later.
No, my friends know I plug EWB at every point. Yeah.
Well, you can tell you're genuinely passionate about the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like this, and I think the biggest thing for me is that I've had so many opportunities to learn and grow and explore.
Mm-hmm.
My interest in international development, not only through the junior fellowship, which is like my 4-month placement, but through the other different things I've been able to do there.
And I would say transitioning that back into your work for 12 months with IBI,
Mm-hmm.
you continue to work on civil engineering and continue to work on the development of physical infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
But why don't you tell people a little bit more about what you were doing at IBI?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the transition from Kwangu Kwako, which is like a 5-person startup.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that guy, there have been more now. They've hired a few people since. So from that small scale startup to a company like IBI, which is a global firm, offices all over the world. Even in Toronto, like we had, I'd say like even 500 people just like in my office. So just making that transition from a tiny ass startup to a really big firm was like huge in and of itself, and just seeing the different focus as well in terms of like the scale of the projects that we're working on, and the scale of our focus, really just like focusing on a city-wide level of how we can innovate in different ways to make cities more advanced, technology-driven, etc. So what I was doing, I was in the traffic engineering and road user safety group. So my work focused a lot on engaging with different clients to help them in different projects, be it like transit related, traffic related, etc., to kind of improve on that aspect of what they're doing. And I guess to just give examples of the different things that I was working on, it just like ranged from traffic engineering, so like coordinating different signals along the roadway to allow people to travel more efficiently on those roadways, improving like transit, so this thing called transit priority measures, all these different ways that you allow transit to move more swiftly and more efficiently in your city, specifically as it has to like mingle in and out of traffic. Right. So helping different, I guess, regions or different municipalities to implement different strategies to help improve transit flow. Things called traffic impact studies. So if you have a new development or say a condo coming up in a certain area, that's going to input like an influx of a few hundred people just in that area. And whenever there's new people, people make trips. They have to go from A to B, and they're going to be coming from that condo and going back to that condo. And so if people are driving, especially, we need to look at how that's going to impact the local road network and if that's going to have any significant negative impacts on that. And based on that, we suggest improvements to the area to accommodate for that increased demand. So that's like doing those kinds of assessments. Doing parking studies as well, which is can be as wide as like a town or a city assessing the parking supply and demand in that area and finding different ways to kind of innovate on how they provide parking and as well implementing all these different parking technologies like wayfinding apps to let you know where parking is throughout the city, stuff that allow you to book your parking spot in advance so when you get there you have a spot ready for you. All these different cool innovations, all the way down to like maybe a mall that has a parking lot needs to assess based on how many more people are coming to the mall if they need to increase their supply and how we make that work. So a lot of different technical projects kind of focused on different areas. And so my role was mainly to support like a lot of the full-time staff and like our managers in implementing all these projects. So that looked like doing like a technical analysis with like a bunch of data that I had to kind of assess what improvements need to be made, etc. All the way to like going out to the field to collect data. So speaking again about like signal coordination, driving up and down a corridor to time how long it takes, to time how long I've stopped at red lights, etc. To kind of see where the areas for improvement are and how we can kind of optimize that. And all the way to writing proposals for different projects, writing final reports to summarize all of our findings, preparing presentations and pitch, just decks for my managers and everyone else to kind of present to kind of summarize our findings. So really, I got a wide variety of things from just the technical side all the way to like the report writing and kind of the client-facing side of things as well. So I think that was a great aspect of it as well, just to be able to get all of that.
Right. Were most of the projects you were working on focused in Toronto?
I'd say they were more focused in Ontario.
Okay.
Yeah. So Toronto, GTHA were a lot of the people that we worked with, and then there's some more provincial scale projects as well that we got to work on, and then one project I got to work on as well. I think my favorite project was about a transit signal priority system that is being implemented in Boulder, Colorado. So that was really fun because I got the project in my first week and I got like a giant data set of just like bus detections along all different intersections along the route. Right. And so my job was like, okay, take this data of all the buses where they are at different times of the day. I think it was like a month's worth of data. And it said, tell us if the transit signal priority system that we implemented has actually been beneficial. So that was just like come up with my key performance indicators, like how am I actually going to measure that this is beneficial, to like crunching the numbers and crunching the data to kind of assess it, to extracting findings from it, to putting those findings into like visual representations and graphics that would be easily presentable or like easy to relate to a client, for example, and then taking all of that and summarizing it into like a final report as well.
So really top to bottom.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really interesting because that project had been going on for, I want to say, like 5 years, if not more, before I got there. Because the stage that I was at was the kind of evaluation stage. They had already gone through the one first need assessment. Do we need transit signal priority along this corridor? Okay, now that we've said we need it, what are the parameters going to look like? What's the algorithm of the TSP system going to look like? And figuring all that out. Once that was done, it's like, okay, now we need to actually implement it in the city. And then after that, it's now just about the evaluation. So even that felt like a very comprehensive project, and it took, I think, start to finish, it was about 8 months from when I got the data set to when we ended up like giving them the final report with all of our findings and everything like that. And that 8 months, which is like 2/3 of my PY there, was just one section of a multi-year long project. So it was I think one other thing that I noted about working at IBI in such a big place, it's like the scale and the time span of all of the projects that we worked on.
Right.
Because I don't think there's any project that I worked on that like from that project lifespan is like start to finish, but more start to finish of one part of that project. So that was really interesting as well.
I feel like, that being said, it sounds like you worked on quite a few projects over the course of 12 months.
Yeah.
How many would you estimate?
30 plus. I think 30 plus is a safe estimate.
Wow.
And there's some projects that are like more involved in than others because if traffic impact studies, for example, those analyses are a lot more quick, so you can churn those out with like a much relatively shorter time span. And so I got to like hop on to a few of those, really just doing like the traffic analysis of like a specific intersection, seeing any places where like any specific roads that become super congested, and then proposing solutions to kind of address that. So those kinds of projects are like quick and dirty, you just get them done in no time. But then some longer scale projects, I think I was typically juggling like 2 or 3 projects at a time, which was great because you get to just like split your time whatever you wanted, and then
you don't get bored.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then as you have capacity, you just like kind of take on the small projects as they come along. So yeah, I think just because of the nature of all that work, I think I got to work on a wide variety of different things.
Right. I only bring this up because like, as somebody who hasn't really interacted with civil engineering in my time, I think the perception is that civil engineering is significantly slower. And that projects are on this huge time scale.
Yeah.
But just from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you got to work on a lot of different things.
Exactly, and I think that's a relatively fair assessment as well. Just because like infrastructure takes time not only like to build and everything like that, but and the thing about infrastructure is that once you've built it, you've committed yourself to that piece of infrastructure for like 50 to 100 years. And so, given that, you want to make sure that you do it right. But the thing is that any project that has like a multi-year lifespan, every project is staged, and each stage is like a mini project in and of itself. And so even though our projects are very long-term, you can kind of just like take a stage and just like kind of dive into it and work with that as a project in and of itself. And it has its own project feel. It's like, for example, like the Boulder project I worked on for transit signal priority, that was just like one stage of a much longer project that I got to work on. So like that stage was a project.
Right. So even though the grand scale, like bird's eye view of the project is really big, from like your human perspective, the project can be smaller, so that you yourself don't really get bored, disenchanted with it, so on and so forth.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think I loved just like how everything was structured, just for the fact that I got to work on a lot of different things. And I think the great thing about my team was that when I first got there, one, just like everyone came by my desk to say hello, just to make sure that I felt welcome and just introduce themselves. And then as well, multiple people on my team just kind of took me aside in my first week and said, hey, this is what I do. This is kind of the stuff that I focus on. This is how I see you potentially getting involved in my work throughout your time here. If this is something that you're interested in, let me know and I'll get you on.
Gotcha.
And as well, IBI Group has, like, for the PY students, have a mentorship program. And the mentorship program, from what I've heard, is like kind of hit or miss, depending on the mentor that you get. But I got a very amazing mentor.
So hit.
Yeah. Straight hit, out of the park, home run. All the sports analogies that you want to use. And so he was very good about, one, getting me on his projects, two, asking me to think critically about what I want to do and what projects I want to get on. Not only just like for my enjoyment, like while at IBI, just like thinking long term in terms of like thinking the stuff that I might want to do as it might relate to my fourth year, and the stuff that I might think I want to do for like a master's if I end up doing that, or anything like that. And whenever I expressed an interest to him, he made an explicit point to make sure that whenever an opportunity came up, I got a chance to work on that type of project. And that was very beneficial for me as well, because one thing that I learned while on PY is that if you don't ask for something, you most likely won't get it. I assumed that while at work, because I was at such a big firm, work would just be coming like left and right. I'd never have nothing to do. People would always have stuff for me to do, and I would just like kind of just like chill by myself and just like let my workload come and go as it pleases. That wasn't the case. About like the first 2 months were good because, like, you know, I was a new person. People were good about giving me work and everything like that, and we also had a lot of work to do. But about 2 months, I found myself with like an empty workload, and it was a very strange situation to be in, because then I knew then the responsibility fell on me to go and ask people for different kinds of work, but it was very, like, it wasn't something that I anticipated, and so it just became like I guess like a mental hurdle to get over, to be like, okay, like go around and say what's going, like what are you doing? Can I get work? What are you doing? Can I get work? And I think that was being proactive about my workload and being proactive about what I wanted to do and making sure that I got myself on those kinds of projects was not something that I thought that I would need to do. And so when that came about, it was just kind of an interesting thing to navigate, because I think at that point I went to my shell a little bit and I said, it's awkward, like how do you ask for work because they're clearly busy and I don't want to bother them because they have a lot of work to do and everything like that. So it was an interesting thing to navigate, but when I finally like did just like go up to different people, ask them for work, I got put on a bunch of interesting projects and a bunch of cool things. Like for example, one of my managers was very big on data analytics, and he was kind of establishing our data analytics work at IBI. And so when I told him like, hey, I'm very interested in that type of stuff, I'd love to explore it. If you ever get an opportunity or a project that you need, put me on it. And it didn't happen right away. There weren't any opportunities right at the time, but I think a month or two later, he called me into a room. He's like, okay, we need this piece of analytics done for this client. Get it, and we're kind of short-staffed right now. Get it to me in the next couple of days. And then from that, after getting that deliverable done, proving myself, so to speak, I, for the rest of my PY term, I think this is for the last like 6 or so months, I was doing data analytics work like the left and right, which is really cool because that was something that I didn't know I was particularly interested in. I just wanted to explore more, and I ended up loving it. To the point that like I'm now taking like CSC 343, Introduction to Databases, purely because of the work that I was doing at IBI and just like kind of the interest that my manager kind of sparked in me, and just like the experience that I got working on data analytics stuff there.
So you mentioned that just like, you know, databases that have now influenced your fourth year. Like how else did PUI, like either at IBI or with the EWB fellowship, influence what you are now doing in your fourth year? Like what changed?
Yeah, so from an IBI perspective, I think it's mainly they kind of got me thinking about what skills I have and what skills I need, and also more specifically thinking about what stuff what stuff particularly interested me that I want to pursue further if I did decide to continue with like academically, like with a master's and all that type of stuff. And then in particular as well, IBI gave me an interest in like just like the project management aspect of things. So like all the non-technical stuff that you don't necessarily learn as much of in class. And so now, just like seeing how important that is, but not necessarily getting as much experience in that area. Now, like for example, I have a core course in my 4th year for it's called Engineering Project Management and Finance. That course is like super interesting and super valuable to me now, and I don't think it would have been as much without my PY, just because I've seen the importance of project management. I've seen the importance of like client relations and managing that. And I've got to learn anecdotally just from my manager in like a mentorship role, just like all the different tips and tricks and different things to consider when you're in that role. But I value experiential learning, and I didn't get as much of it there just by the nature of how our teams were structured. So now I get the opportunity to do that with this course in 4th year. And so now, knowing how valuable and important that is, I'm going to put extra effort into that now. Like for my junior fellowship, for example, I think that one's less so. I wouldn't say change anything, because I think I already knew that I wanted to take development related.
Perhaps reinforce it.
Reinforce it and kind of just like see how engineering and infrastructure in particular kind of fits in a development context. So I already knew that I was going to take a capstone in like that was more global development focused. I already knew that I was going to take APS 420, which is Technology and Design for Global Development. I took a course, POL 208, Introduction to International Relations, over the summer, just so one, because I'm pursuing the Global Engineering Certificate, and also just because I wanted to expand my thinking into that kind of realm and kind of get a course that changed my pace there. And I think for me, overall though, if you kind of blend my junior fellowship with Kwangu Kwako in Nairobi and then my 12 months at IBI in Toronto, I think the thing that both of those meshed together have kind of given me the perspective or the insight that they've given me is how to be an infrastructural engineer or someone with a civil engineering, infrastructure engineering background in a global development space. How to blend those two passions that I have and potentially make a career out of it some way, shape, or form down the line. Because that's really, I think, leading up to my PY, that was the thing that I was grappling with, like how I want to do something infrastructure related, but I also want to see how, what skills I can gain in it, et cetera, that will help me with like this greater goal of creating a better world through international development. And so working at Kwangu Kwako, just like a startup that's purely focused on infrastructure and using infrastructure to better the lives of people. And then transitioning to IBI, a firm that's taking fairly robust and developed cities and figuring out, like Toronto, for example, and figure out how we can innovate on them, how we can make them better, how we can make them quote unquote smart, and taking those aspects, those philosophies, and seeing how we can then apply that in a development context, so that, you know, any country or any city that kind of lacks critical infrastructure, or like things like say public transit or like robust roads, etc., all the kind of things that you kind of the foundation of infrastructure that you need to function as a city. How can I go about working in that space to help develop those pieces of infrastructure, while also kind of innovating on that as well and using similar principles that I've learned at IBI.
Okay.
So it's both experiences in different ways have kind of given me more clarity as to what I want to do down the line, and then also how I can go about doing it, what skills I need, what experience I need, and then how to, as well, more importantly, like how to market myself as an engineer who wants to participate in global development as well.
And we're just running low on time. It's been awesome talking to you. I guess last question for you is, well, a bit twofold. One, is there anything else that you think people listening to this, especially people who might be like before PY or currently applying for PY, that you might want to hear? And second of all, if people want to reach you, where could they do that?
Oh, 100%. So if people want to do PY or something, what should they take out of it? Yeah. I think, well, that's an interesting question. It's very like almost tough to answer, I think, because
sure.
there's so much that you can say. And
I mean, you've already said a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the thing, one, if you have the opportunity to do it and get a co-op, do it 100%. I think the extent to which my PUI informed just like what I want to do with my life, what I want to do with my fourth year, just like the clarity and sense of direction that I got from both working at Kwangu Kwako and then working at IBI Group was super valuable as well. And it makes even just like coming back to school feel, it makes all the stuff I'm learning here at school feel a lot more useful, and that I can see why I need it. I can see from my PY the things that I need to develop, and then how my coursework can help develop it. So beyond actually saying do a PY, I think just be intentional about what you're trying to learn about it. Go into it with questions about yourself, about your career, about your capabilities, etc., that you want to answer, and then intentionally seek out the people who will be able to answer your questions. Gotcha. Be curious, be intentional, and make sure that you know what you want to get out of it, because I think there's so much to gain and so much to learn from doing a PY, and that experience becomes that much more valuable when you're intentional about what you're trying to get out of it.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of people will have questions and would want to reach out to you after this. Where could they find you?
Yeah, I'm on campus a lot of the time now. You can reach out to me like on Facebook, David Boroto, or like by email, david.boroto@mail.utoronto.ca.
Very consistent.
Yeah, there you go. And yeah, if I'm not in the Engsci common room, I'm usually in the EWB office. If I'm not there, then I'm in the pit. So I think I'm fairly loud and boisterous. So I'm fairly easy to pick out in a crowd.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Dave, thank you for talking. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
So this has been That Thing I Did for a Year. I will catch you next time.